Welcome back, focused learners. Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we're wrapping up with part 8 of an absolutely brilliant 8-part tutorial called IPv6 Troubleshooting for System Administrators and Technical Support. This was put together by Virtualization Options LLC, which is this fantastic Colorado-based technology research, education, and advisory organization. Now, this explainer is specifically geared towards sysadmins and tech support folks who already know their way around IPv4 troubleshooting, but are right in the thick of migrating their organization to IPv6. We're strictly focusing on Chapter 8 today, so we're going to completely shift our troubleshooting mindset from the comfortable, familiar world of IPv4 into the actual realities of IPv6.
Here's our roadmap for this chapter. We'll be hitting 6 key areas: unlearning IPv4 muscle memory, dual-stack network realities, core mechanics like NDP and DAD, the PMTUD black hole, navigating VPNs and translators, and finally some IPv6 troubleshooting golden rules. It might feel like trying to read a map upside down at first, but I promise, by the end of this, things like mysterious MTU failures and those pesky VPN leaks are going to be completely demystified.
All right, Section 1, Unlearning IPv4 Muscle Memory. Before we can fix IPv6, we really have to break those ingrained IPv4 habits.
Let's look at the contrast here. In our old IPv4 landscape, we relied heavily on broadcasts. Well, in IPv6, broadcast is literally dead. It's completely replaced by multicast. That means your old reliable tricks like pinging 255.255.255.255 totally meaningless now. Plus, NAT, or Network Address Translation, is largely a thing of the past. In IPv6, every single device is potentially globally routable. That fundamentally shifts how we have to think about firewalls and security.
And this brilliantly illustrates one of the biggest mental hurdles: seeing multiple addresses on a single interface at the exact same time. You've got a link local address starting with FE80, a global unicast address, maybe a temporary privacy address. In the IPv4 days, your brain would instantly scream IP conflict. But in IPv6, this is absolutely 100% normal, expected behavior.
Let's move on to Section 2, Dual-Stack Network Realities. The reality is most production networks run both protocols simultaneously. And this brings us to RFC 8305, better known as Happy Eyeballs. Basically, modern browsers really want to use IPv6. They try it first, and if it doesn't connect instantly, they wait 250 milliseconds and then fire up an IPv4 connection to race it. Now, if your IPv6 path is broken, the user doesn't actually get an explicit connection error page. Instead, every single connection they make takes a 250 millisecond latency penalty. So the internet doesn't look broken, it just feels super sluggish.
Because of that, a dual-stack failure can be totally invisible if you're just casually observing. You really have to force the issue. Here's a highly practical tip. When you're troubleshooting web connectivity, jump into your terminal and use curl-6 and curl-4. That forces the traffic over a specific stack. You want to test them completely independently before you draw any conclusions. Always isolate.
Okay, Section 3. Let's dig into the core mechanics: NDP and DHD. These are what replace ARP and DHCP on your local link.
First up, duplicate address detection, or DAD. When an interface gets an IPv6 address, it doesn't just use it right away. It marks it tentative and sends out a multicast neighbor solicitation. If another host responds, boom, conflict detected. The interface immediately slaps a DAD failed status on that address, which means zero global connectivity. You'll see this a lot with identical MAC addresses from cloned VMs, or if your switches have misconfigured port security blocking DAD packets. So if a user has no connection, always check their interface for that DAD failed flag.
Then we have Neighbor Discovery Protocol, or NDP, which is the new ARP. But since it relies heavily on IPv6 multicast, your network switches absolutely must have MLD snooping enabled. Without it, your switches will just treat those multicast packets like broadcasts and flood NDP traffic everywhere, which will absolutely crush your performance. And hey, if you need to clear out stale entries, kind of like flushing your old ARP cache, you'll run IP-6 nay flush dev f0 on Linux or netship interface IPv6 delete neighbors on Windows.
And how do we find our default gateway now? Well, not from DHCP anymore. You get it from router advertisements, or RAs. Hosts just silently listen for periodic RA refreshes to keep their default route alive. If those get blocked, the host drops the route. You also have to watch out for rogue RAs. A device accidentally sending an RA with a lifetime of 0 will literally tell your clients to drop their gateway.
You can hunt these down in Wireshark with the filter ICMPv6.type equals 134. Honestly, a lot of the time, these are just generated by Docker bridge networks, so setting IPv6 false in your Docker daemon or using rguard on your switches is the way to fix it.
All right, Section 4. Put on your digital detective hat for this one, the PMTU black hole.
This is probably the most frustrating edge case you're going to see. Imagine this. You ping a server, it works perfectly. But the second you try to SSH in or start a large HTTPS download, the connection just hangs right after the TCP handshake. Why on earth does a tiny packet sail right through, but a large one just vanishes?
Well, it's a path MTU discovery, or PMTUD, black hole. Here's exactly what happens. The source sends a huge packet. Down the line, a router hits a link with a smaller MTU limit. Now, unlike IPv4, IPv6 routers do not fragment packets themselves. So the router drops it and sends back an ICMPv6 packet too big message to the source, basically saying, hey, shrink this. But here's the kicker. An overly aggressive firewall along the way blocks that crucial ICMPv6 response. So the source never gets the memo, keeps sending massive packets, and they keep getting dropped. It's a silent, invisible black hole.
You can confirm this real quick. Run a small ping. Ping 6-S 100, which passes. Then try ping 6-S 1400, and it fails. So the crucial point is fixing it. You absolutely must permit ICMPv6 Type 2 inbound on all your firewalls. If you don't control the firewall causing the issue, an alternative workaround is to configure TCP MSS clamping on your router. Maybe clamp it to 1440 bytes to artificially restrict the packet size right during the handshake.
Also, just a quick heads up about extension headers. A lot of older middle boxes, like legacy load balancers, will freak out and drop IPv6 packets if they see an extension header they don't recognize. Oh, and per RFC 8021, atomic fragments, which are fragmentation headers on packets that aren't actually fragmented, are a known security risk meant to bypass firewalls. Configure your firewall to drop those immediately.
Moving to Section 5, Navigating VPNs and Translators. When you mix IPv6 with legacy VPNs, it's usually a mess. Older VPN clients either leak your IPv6 traffic straight to the local internet, bypassing corporate security, or they try to block it, but do it so poorly that they break access to all IPv6 sites. You really have two options: properly tunnel IPv6 by pushing a default route, or literally disable IPv6 entirely on the client adapter. You'll also see tons of split DNS issues here. Use dig plus short AAA to point explicitly at your internal, external, and BPN DNS servers so you can see exactly who is handing out the wrong addresses.
To bridge the divide, you'll probably use NAT64 and DNS64. This synthesizes an IPv6 address for an IPv4-only server using that 64:FF90B/96 prefix. It's super elegant, but it completely falls apart if an application uses a hard-coded IPv4 address instead of a DNS hostname because it just bypasses the DNS64 translation. Oh, and if you ever spot the legacy 6-4 protocol out there using the Anycast address 192.88.99.1, just abandon it. It was officially deprecated because it's wildly unreliable.
Finally, Section 6, IPv6 Troubleshooting Golden Rules.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that these aren't just polite recommendations. These specific ICMPv6 types, 1, 2, 3, and 133 through 137, are the absolute lifeblood of your network. If your security team treats ICMPv6 like old-school IPv4 ping traffic and blocks it, your network will literally collapse. They are non-negotiable for error signaling, PMTUD, and neighbor discovery.
Rule 2, embrace the multiple addresses. Seeing a ton of IP addresses on one interface is perfectly normal. Don't waste time troubleshooting it as an error. iOS, for example, rotates privacy addresses incredibly aggressively to stop tracking. That is a feature, not a bug. And speaking of addresses, please document your delegated prefixes in an IPAM system. If your ISP silently shifts your prefix, all your static server setups are going to break instantly without warning.
If you take only one thing away from this entire explainer today, let it be this: never, ever block ICMPv6 entirely. Outright blocking it breaks NDP, it breaks PMTUD, and it breaks the multicast memberships that your network fundamentally needs just to exist. Which leaves us with this crucial question to ponder. Do you truly understand how your network handles ICMPv6 and extension headers? Or are you flying blind in a dual-stack world? Thank you so much for exploring Chapter 8 of this amazing tutorial with me today. I highly encourage you to log right into your firewalls, review your rules, and make sure you aren't accidentally creating the exact IPv6 black holes we just talked about. Until next time, keep learning, keep testing, and stay curious.